And when I go live this way, Zoom takes however long it takes. Sometimes it happens instantly, and sometimes it takes like 45 seconds. All right, you should be live now.
Perfect. Thank you, Bryce. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aidan Buckley, Manager Communications and Engagement at the Sunshine Coast Regional District. You're very welcome to tonight's community information session on the SCRD's 2022 budget. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located within the traditional territories of the Seychelles Nation and the Squamish Nation. Now, tonight's session is due to last roughly an hour, and we're due to be here until about 8 p.m. It's going to include a presentation followed by a Q&A to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have about this year's budget. We're also live on YouTube, and a recording of this entire session will be available soon after we finish this evening, so you can share it and also watch it back if you wish. So just a few things with Zoom webinar that we're using today. So if you would like to ask a question, I ask that you either put it in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, or if you'd like to ask it yourself, you can raise your hand and you can do so. So just to introduce you to some of the faces on your screen here, joining us this evening is Area D Director Andreas Theis. We have Area E Director Donna McMahon, Area F Director Mark Hiltz, and also the SCRD's Chief Financial Officer Tina Perot. And we're going to start with Tina, who's going to start screen sharing and begin our presentation tonight, which is focused on areas D, E, and F. And just so you know, we got more information sessions coming up tomorrow evening and also next week. And yeah, we'll let you know a little bit more about that a little bit later. So take it away, Tina.
So much, Aidan. So thank you everyone for joining us here for our community information sessions for the SCRD budget 2022. This presentation is going to focus specifically on area D, E, and F. And so what we're going to be covering today is a little overview of what was covered in round one, provide some information on the utility rates for 2022. We'll cover some of the preliminary taxation information ahead of round two budget, and there'll be some more information to come at that particular session. And we'll provide the community an opportunity to ask questions about proposed projects and the budget process overall. So as far as the timelines go, the regional district began its budget this year with a community survey that was conducted in September 2021. Those survey results in our pre-budget sessions were held on November the 1st. So if community members are interested in what was included in some of those community questions and results, that can be found on that particular agenda on our website. At our pre-budget sessions, we typically review what type of proposed initiatives and preliminary taxation are going to be ahead of our budget. And we conducted our round one budget, which is the full budget proposals and decisions, and that was held on December 13th and 14th of this past month. Now we're conducting our community information sessions, and we have 4 scheduled. We have one this evening, we have one tomorrow evening, and we have 2 next Tuesday and Wednesday. On January 24th, we are scheduled to have our round 2 budget deliberations, and our final budget is scheduled to be adopted on February the 24th. So what's impacting this year's budget? We have approximately 147 projects that are carried forwards from prior years. So those are continuations. And we have approximately about 90 projects that are new for 2022. And those can be a mixture of just very small projects. They might be new staffing resources, etc. So we also had a number of projects that came through our preliminary budget that were mandatory in nature. And what that means is that there's not really a decision to be made because we have some regulatory requirements or we have assets that are failing. And so we have to ensure those are in there. So those were decisions that were made in November 1st, and those items were included in our round one budget numbers. We also are looking for additional staffing for 2022, and there's approximately 16 additional full-time positions. Some of these are temporary in nature for things like cleaning buses due to COVID, protocols. We also have some student positions and several other positions within our water and our utilities divisions as well, and solid waste. We also have several projects within our various infrastructure and services which require some preventative maintenance to fix upgrades, etc. So specifically, some of the main projects or the larger projects in our budget this year are going to be things like our post-closure funding for our Seashell landfill. We're significantly underfunded, and that particular landfill is scheduled to be closing in 2025. We also have several improvements and equipment upgrades for our fire departments. In particular, Half Moon Bay Fire Hall is seeing a feasibility study for its hall number 2 and several purchases of equipment. We also have north and south water main improvements. There are several $100,000 worth of projects that are going to be done there. And one of the good news stories there is that we're going to be using a lot of Community Works gas tax to fund a majority of those projects, which means the service users are not having to supplement that through their parcel taxes. One of the other regulatory items that we have are several dam upgrades to our various McNeil Dam and our Chapman Lake Dam. And so that is upwards to $2 million of investment that are being contributed there. We also, if people have been reading the newspaper, have seen that we have secured the water license for the Church Road well, and procurement has started and been awarded for that particular project and is scheduled to start very soon. And that's over $7 to $8 million. It's going to be some more information there because as we procure these items, we need some approval there. We also have upgrades to our recreation facilities totaling over $215,000 of new investments. We already invest upwards of $750,000 to the recreation facilities for facility upgrades on an annual basis. So now getting into some of the taxation numbers here. 1 second, just have some delays. Okay, great. I didn't miss the slide there. So our utility rates. So our water utility rates were presented for consideration to the board in November, and the bylaws were approved on December the 10th. And for our water utilities, regional water is seeing an increase of approximately $58 per property. And North Pender is seeing approximately $86 and South Pender about $61. Our refuse collections, or garbage and food waste collections for areas B, D, E, and F, our rural areas who provide that service, we presented to the board consideration to have a no change for that particular fee this year. And that's partly in consideration to the overall budget has not seen the increases to some of the contracts, etc. We also recognize that with some service disruption that it was quite prudent to go ahead and not increase it the 5% that it was scheduled to do. So that 5% has been deferred into the following year. We also presented our wastewater fees for this year. And so with our 15 collective wastewater facilities, they range anywhere between $10 to $315. Some of the facilities saw no change. So overall, after round 1, we are expecting a total operating budget of over $52 million. And as you can see, the largest services for this is our recreation and cultural services. And this not only includes our community recreation facilities, our 5 community recreation facilities, including that of Pender Harbor Pool. It also includes funding such as Dakota Ridge, our library funding that we contribute to, our museums. So it includes quite a diverse set of services. And then following that is our water and wastewater budgets, as we see more and more investments and growing needs in the operational budgets there. Our capital budget after round one includes those carry forwards I mentioned. So there's over those 147 projects. So again, it's not a new investment of 41 million because last year we saw a capital budget of approximately over 30 million. We're looking at a total of budget of over 42 million for 2022. So majority of the investment you can see is in our water and wastewater facilities. The two large projects there, one of them we've already mentioned, which is the Church Road well, and we have our water metering project as well. So moving on to one of the other factors that are really going to be discussed at our round two budget deliberations, and that is the significant increases that the Sunshine Coast saw with its property assessments. Some properties saw a rise as much as 46%, and that's mostly up in our Area A, Pender Harbor, Egmont area. So these will have some impacts, changes in apportionment, so what various areas pay for taxes. And essentially how we recover taxes here at the regional district is through our assessments of our properties. So that has some implications to our budgeting and what that means to taxpayers. So overall, the Sunshine Coast saw an increase of approximately 1.48 of non-market values. And what that means is growth related to or assessment increases related to growth. So that means new units or new development in the region. The increase due to market was driven mostly by the change in market shifts. So what I could sell my home last year, meaning what I could sell my home this year. So we saw over a 32, almost 33% average. So overall assessment raised in the region for 34.27%. That is quite dramatic. We haven't seen a rise this much in several years. So we're going to move on to see what the impacts to property taxation means as far as some of the new projects that have been approved, as well as what the impacts to the assessment does to various areas. So we're starting here with Area D, Roberts Creek, and the proposed taxation here is articulated per 100,000 of assessed value of a home. And so for 2021, the SCRD rate per 100,000 was approximately $273 per 100,000 of assessment. And for 2022, due to the assessment increase, that means that the change for the 2022 rate would be about $220. So we see a little bit of a change there. And for 2022, the preliminary SCRD tax rate, so that means all the decisions that have been approved, is approximately $234. So we've given some scenarios here is if your property value is assessed at 500,000, 750, and 1 million. So again, you can just take the rates up above and calculate that for every $100,000 worth of assessment. So for Area D, where the majority of their taxation dollars go, again, mostly in recreation and culture, our water parcel taxes and our protective services. So the Roberts Creek Fire Department also makes a large portion of where the taxes go there. Transportation services includes our public transit service. Again, environmental services is our solid waste. So that includes things like the solid waste division, refuse, some of our landfills and servicing that. So for Area E, our proposed taxation rate for 2021 was $268.18. And the impacts related to assessments, again, you'll see a slight decrease there if we didn't change taxation by $1. And the 2022 preliminary SCRD tax rate is approximately $224. And again, you're seeing this, these changes and these slight decreases is because of some of the assessment changes in that particular area. So again, we have here where a $500,000 valued home would see approximately $1,124, and a $1 million home being $2,248. I see Director McMahon.
Yeah, Director McMahon. We have Director McMahon with her hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that's not the same as I saw earlier. That looks to me like it's Area F Islands. or, yeah, that's,
We did update these
Come back.
presentations, Director McMahon. I sent around just an updated presentation earlier. Would it be that?
no, it seems very low, but we'll come back to it later.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure we're presenting the correct information there, Director McMahon. Did do a double check later this afternoon to verify some of these. So area E, as far as where do the tax dollars go, again, recreation, culture being one of the others, and protective services, and that's for the Gibsons and area district fire department. Water parcel taxes, and again, transportation services as being some of the larger services that they contribute towards. For area F, proposed taxation, the SCRD tax rate was approximately 277, and the 2022 assessment increase looks to be about 210. Now in area F, there definitely was a shift to the residential class away from the industrial class. And again, we're going to present some more information and details on what the impact was. So the overall increase or the impacts due to assessment has definitely impacted this area. And so the preliminary SCRD rate is about 223. And again, these are preliminary rates because we actually don't get our final assessment numbers until the end of March. And so these will be finalized once the tax notices are sent out through the surveyor of taxes in May. So again, $500 to $1 million property, you see there's various changes there to the property tax value. So area F, majority of their taxation dollars, again, go to recreation and culture, but one of their significant amount is transportation services. And what's included in there is our port services as well, included as part of the transportation services, so transit and ports. And they do have an area F special things like for some of the various, the Langdale float, for instance. So they do pay for additional things for the servicing the islands. So again, protective services being a participant of the Gibsons and District Fire Department. So we also want to ensure that we articulate for our area F islands. We have two islands, of course, there. One is Gambier and one is Keats. So here we've articulated that essentially some of the tax notices due to assessment definitely have decreased over 2021. So they're going to see marginally quite a lower tax increase over than they've seen in the prior year. And so for 2022, the preliminary SCRD tax rate is $92.36 per 100,000. So as you can see, quite a significant decrease from prior years. And so again, $500 to $1 million value. One of the caveats to this, though, is again, what partly was mentioned earlier is that it is really relative to how much your property assessment changed over the average. If you notice on your tax notice assessment from BC Assessment, there is a little bar graph on the far right of that particular notice that says how much did my property assessment increase over the average. And what you're probably looking for, if you were lower than the average, then you're going to see a lower than normal tax rate increase than your neighbor who might have had an assessment that's higher than the average. So what's next? Today we're going to be holding our information sessions over the next couple of weeks. Our round 2 budget again is on January 24th, and those meetings are held publicly and are available for the public to view and participate in. And those start at 9:30 in the morning on that 24th, and that information can be found on our website. And again, our budget bylaw is scheduled to be adopted at the February 24th board meeting. Again, there's a lot more information on our Let's Talk webpage. So again, that survey, and if there are further questions that people want to do, they can submit their questions through that website as well and find further information. So we'll take any questions if there are any at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. I know Director Hiltz, you just wanted to speak briefly just about area F. So yeah, please feel free to do so.
Yes, thanks, Aidan. Yeah, thanks, Tina, for the presentation. And yeah, just the difference of the cost per property in the difference between the islands and the mainland portions. It's It's the basket of services that each property is a participant in. And there's two main differences between the islands and the mainland. There's the fire protection and the community recreation facilities, which is roughly about $1 million of taxation that the islands are not part of. So it's a service that they do not participate in and are not taxed for, and it's reflected in their overall tax amounts. So just some significant differences between mainland and the islands. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hills. I know we've had some people who've joined us just there during the presentation. So if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to do so. Down the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a Q&A tab where you can type them in, or else you can raise your hand and I can have you come into the meeting and you can ask your question yourself. Director Tice, did you want to speak at all to assessments you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little personal note that yeah, I did see my property go up by about 25%, but now I'm actually buoyed to learn that that was below the average. So I may actually do okay. So I just want to reiterate that if your home gets assessed 25% higher than it was the previous year, that doesn't mean your tax bill is going up by 25%. So thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Toy. So we've had some questions that have come in through this week on the budget engagement platform, as Tina mentioned earlier, at letstalk.scrd.ca/budget. And the first one, maybe I'll see if one of our electeds would like to take a run at this one first, because that's who was put to. The question is, how can you look at nearly a 7% increase in taxes when it's obvious there is not justification for the increase? It appears the SCRD has taken advantage of increased housing values to get more taxes without an increase in services. It's easy to spend other people's money without proof that the funds are actually needed by just adding a percentage figure to the last budget. So I'm not too sure who'd like to take that one first. Okay, Director McMahon.
Sure, I'll jump in and then I'll let other directors go after it. First, we don't start with a percentage. We start by going through the budget item by item by item to see what is needed. And then we add up the whole bill at the end of the day. The cost of delivering the services is not relative to you're charged relative to your property value, but we have a fixed pie. It's how much it costs. And that's what we're aiming at. We have a lot of costs coming at us, mostly related to water and to the landfill. Very expensive. Also the fire departments, especially the last 10 years, the fire departments have required a whole lot more equipment and training. If you even look at a fire truck, buying a new fire truck these days, which Director Ties could speak to, is the better part of $1 million. And we don't really have any choices about those kind of service increases. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Director.
Thanks for that, Donna. And I do want to say that you know, we're still playing catch up from about 40 years of underinvestment in our infrastructure, especially around water. And of course, as GM Perot mentioned, the landfill has not been funded appropriately to close in 5 or 6 years' time. So there's a lot of playing catch up. And when it comes to fire departments, the one thing that we need to remember is that while they do cost us money, they save us a whole lot of money, more than they cost us in reduced insurance bills, because our home insurance is or our home insurance rate is calculated with premiums that are lower when you have a fire department that services your area. So just something to remember, and thanks for that.
Director Hiltz, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I'll go in on the assessment piece that this dramatic rise in the assessment seems to be, as far as I understand from BC Assessment, they're attributing it to the part of a shift in COVID as people leave urban areas and move to the new term is the rural area. This is where people are drawn to this and they're bringing money and building here. But that movement isn't directly related to what the overall budget is. So the services that we require are the services that require, and the assessment is a separate issue. And it's just how the taxation system apportions who pays how much, the shift of the burden. So they are separate issues. The rate of housing and how the market responded over COVID and the shift from an urban environment to the more rural. And as I understand, we're pretty reflective of rural areas within British Columbia, where this is common throughout BC right now. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you all. Jim has asked a question. Thanks for joining us this evening, Jim. He says you stated 147 carryover and 90 new projects, as well as 16 additional staff. Was there any consideration to reducing projects and staff to keep tax increases at or below rate of inflation? So I'm not too sure. I'd like to take a first run at that one. Go ahead, Director Tice.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And, you know, I think all the directors are cringing every time when we see the number of projects on the books. It's a huge amount of workload, and the issue is that all of them are quite necessary, and I don't think we've got a lot of fat that we can trim. I would love it if you could go through the budget item by item and let us know if you feel like some things should be trimmed. But the board has agreed that these projects are quite necessary, and we need more manpower to handle these projects. And I see GM Perot might have some things to say about that as well.
Go ahead, Tina.
Just to share that the list of the projects, both carryover and the proposed projects are listed on that round one budget and will be provided again in round two. And so it provides quite a bit of detail on what the various projects are being included in the budget and some of the various classifications. So it'll show which ones are related to moving the board's strategic plan, the one that are related to regulatory safety or eminent asset failure. And then you'll see the ones, the heaviest or the largest list of projects you will see will be within our water infrastructure. And so whether it's north-south regional and the joint various projects there, it's quite extensive. And those are things that the community has definitely been asking for. So there is more information, but with that comes the requirement to staff those either internally or externally. So either way, you can't really escape those costs.
Go ahead, Director Hills.
Yeah, I'll go along with, that the budget process, as it's been described to me, is a 5-year rolling financial plan with an annual budget process through this iterative process, pre-budget, and it's an ongoing process. It's throughout the year. It doesn't just come in, here's a bunch of wish lists. It is a very deliberate process throughout the year. There are periods of time where we're focused on it, but it never really ends. So the necessity of the projects comes out throughout the annual process of approving reports and listening to what staff have to recommend, and then it kind of all gets wrapped up. So I would defend that it's this year is lower than in the past, and I think staff does an excellent job of guiding the elected in what's really necessary and what can be deferred, what can't be deferred, and the consequences of it. So I'm quite, I can stand and defend the budget as it is. Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'll say around the time we were elected was one of the times that we went to stage 4. water restrictions. And we went to public meetings, and what the public said was, we need more water. We need it as soon as possible, and we're willing to pay for it because stage 4 is intolerable, which it is, especially for food growers and other business people on the Sunshine Coast. And putting water in the pipes, putting new water in the pipes is expensive, and we are spending the money because we need the water. It's an absolutely necessary investment. So I can back these budget increases. I don't enjoy them, but we need the water and we need the other services, essential services that we provide here on the coast.
Thank you all. We've had another question here. This one came from Ron, who's joining us as well. So Ron says, the SCRD deferred addressing the landfill, etc., for years, and they say we need to pay for it. What items have you deferred to reduce the impact on taxpayers? 16 staff increases sounds pretty outlandish in the current times. So I'll put that one out, whoever like. Go ahead, Director Tice.
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe staff can give us a quick rundown as to where these staff positions are mostly coming from. But a lot of them come in the water department, and that's where we're putting our huge investment in. You know, the deferral of the landfill doesn't mean that the rest of the company can, or now that we need to pay for the landfill doesn't mean that the rest of the budget or the rest of the organization has to take a step back. It means everything needs to keep going. We're more than willing to entertain reducing the budget in certain areas if the people of the Sunshine Coast are willing to also at the same time say, okay, well, we want less service. That's essentially what it comes down to. If you want to save money, that means you get less service, and that's ultimately, I think, what it comes down to. Thanks.
Have anybody you'd like to add to that? Are we good?
I'd like to hear the question again, just to kind of double check that.
Yeah, of course. So Ron is saying the SCRD deferred addressing the landfill for years, and they say we need to pay for it. What items have you deferred to reduce the impact on taxpayers? 16 staff increase sounds pretty outlandish in the current times. So I guess kind of asking, you know, what's being done to maybe better resource the landfill.
Well, I'll just take a little bit at the landfill in that the food waste pickup is one of the significant changes, and the reduction of the curbside collection from weekly to bi-weekly is a way to extend the life of the landfill. So you might say that the landfill has been neglected, that it's a problem that we have to deal with, and these are steps that have gone to extend the life of the landfill as much as we possibly can. If we could all stop putting anything into the landfill, it would be a lot longer, but we continue to throw away waste. So I think the board has looked at ways to extend the life of the landfill and minimize costs. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
You go ahead, Director McMahon.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers, but not all of those 16 positions are permanent. Some of them are temporary to work on various projects. A few of them are carryovers from last year that we haven't hired yet, but we approved last year. And I think summer students may be rolled up in there. Perhaps Tina can add to that.
Yeah, so yeah, the 16 are staff, which as Director McMahon stated, are in various states. Some are full-time positions ongoing. So again, those can be the details of the various positions that are being proposed can be found on that summary in our agendas. So that's available, and we're happy to send more information to people if they want it after this meeting. So there's about 2 new staff from our general government services. Some of that is due to increased privacy requirements. We also have 5.92 new positions within our community services division, and community services includes our parks, our transit, and our community recreation facilities. And a lot of those are due to responding to COVID. So whether it's additional cleaning for our buses, additional strain on our park services. So I think everybody in the province, well, everybody in the world has been visiting nature through COVID. And so that has added a significant amount of strain on our various park services. So again, some temporary positions there for that, including some additional like student positions to help with that. So that's almost 6 positions in our community services division. And some of those, again, are temporary. We have about 3.5 new positions within our planning and development. And planning and development also includes our protective services. So we've got some new resources for emergency planning within our fire departments and for various planning initiatives and improvements for the community, as well as some of our climate adaptation for some of our summer students there. And some of this is funded through grants. So again, we look at other sources of funding for some of these positions. And for our infrastructure services, so this might include our solid waste division to ensure we are attending to those projects. We have over 5 positions, and there's 3 in particular to be able to facilitate the operations of our water utility services. So we also have positions, and how we budget for our positions is we budget prorated. So we don't pull the full dollars for those full-time positions sometimes. So again, the net impact isn't the full 16 because it depends on when we recruit and retain. So we don't always fund them fully in that particular year.
Perfect, thank you. I've just had Lindsay in the chat who's just asking, just said joined a little late. I'm wondering if there's a draft slideshow for reference for the session. So we will be posting it on the SRD website and also on the engagement platform at letstalk.srd.ca /budget, and anticipate having them up there by tomorrow morning at the latest. Ron, so who asked that earlier question about the landfill, has 2 additional questions in here. The first of which is maybe to your point, Director Ties, earlier, where you were speaking about about service levels and the need to maintain them. And Ron is asking, should we not expect our leaders to drive the reduction of services? It's easier to defend increases in taxes and services than to defend cuts to services and maintain tax levels. So I don't know who'd like to take that one. I can repeat it if you'd like as well. Yeah, go ahead, Director McMahon.
Yeah, okay, I'll jump into the shark tank here. In my view, most of our services have no room to be cut. Not really, not without significant service reduction. And in essential services such as fire and water, you don't want to be reducing services. However, one area that we could look at reducing services is recreation, particularly our recreation facilities. And I've mentioned this several times before, and every time I bring it up, I get deluged with angry people saying you can't possibly dream of reducing recreation services. So the reality is that pretty much every service we provide has users who are very invested in those services and want them to be maintained. And we hear from them. I think the only people we don't hear from are the users of the cemeteries. They're not a big lobby group, but it's not a big part of our budget either.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Hills.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the efficiencies and kind of the community services. And one of the things that I think kind of goes unnoticed is the SCRD may have control over land such as Sprock Kids or Shirley Macy, and staff work with community groups such as the Coast Mountain Bike Association and the Disc Golf Association to partner with the SCRD to use the land and to provide facilities that actually don't cost the public much. So that is one of the efficiencies, is to use to channel the volunteer enthusiasm in the users and to put them in touch with staff that can allow them to use facilities. So that is one of the efficiencies that that staff find working with the community. And I wanted to go back to something in Lindsay and said in the chat, if we can, if this question is done.
Yep. Anybody else? No, we're good. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Director Hills.
Lindsay in the chat references the 2022-2026 draft financial plan, which is a 300+ page document. But for me, it is the encyclopedia of SCRD services. You can look at any service, whether that's the cemeteries or recreation, and see how much each area is paying, where the fees are. It's just an outstanding document to understand how this complex ship called the regional district operates. So Lindsay mentions it, so I'll put in a plug to, if you want to get into the details and understand, it's great. And the other document is last year's annual report, which is just the best documents that staff put an awful lot of work into it. And the material is there in fairly understandable language and numbers to really see what's happening with the system. So thanks for Lindsay for pointing that out. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Hills. So Ron had a follow-up to his earlier questions, and he's asking with regards to this year's budget, and he's asking what actual cuts have been included in this year's budget. Maybe I'd take that. You go ahead, Director Tice.
I know there's a few projects that we have deferred for future years, just mostly because of workload for staff, because I'm thinking, I think we want to tackle, for example, bike path planning not till 2022, 23. We also are looking, I think some of the other well options have been deferred just because staff doesn't have the capacity to do that. So I wouldn't call that a cut. There's a few, there are a few projects that are no longer being pursued, but I can't recall them right now. Maybe staff has the answer on that one.
Yeah, I think for 2021, so part of our pre-budget process is we review our carry forward projects and review which ones we don't, or which ones may want to be deferred or postponed. There were several, for instance, the establishment of a new social service contribution service was deferred to 2023 based on staff capacity, and mostly from our legislative side of the house, which is due to the 2022 election. And so they're going to be pretty busy with that this year. So there's no particular service level cuts. And from the staff's perspective, I think what we see is a real increase in service level increase desire from the public. So whether or not it's creating efficiencies in the services we provide, and essentially there is a significant focus on that. So from a reduction in service too, we most certainly have to acknowledge, from my point of view, that services have naturally been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So our 2022 budget, or actually our 2020 budget, we did significant reductions to that, and we continued some of those on into 2021. And so 2022 is almost like we're coming back into the norm. And so we're trying to stabilize some of our resources. We also saw definitely some additional funding from the provincial and the federal government. So things where we had some COVID impacts. So whether or not they're through our transit service. And so in particular, some of those staffing positions are being covered by our COVID restart funds that we received from the province and federal governments last year, late 2020, early 2021. And so we're going to be covering off those particular items that are impacted due to COVID to our services. So they're not necessarily cuts, but they definitely mean that the taxpayer is not holding that burden. So it looks like a lot of additional items, but again, we're also looking at creative ways of how to fund things.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Director McMahon.
Sure. I'm just going to speak a little bit to the demand, because the demand for services has been constantly increasing. And the staffing for about 10 years was completely stable. There were no changes, but the workload was going up steadily, and you can only do that for so long. The planning department in particular, since COVID, the volume of inquiries has tripled. And it hasn't slacked off. They are still, the volume of applications coming in is staggering. And you can't keep providing that much service with only so many people for so long. Whether we'll be able to reduce a few extra services, like we've put in a lot of extra cleaning for the buses, and I suspect the recreation facilities are doing a lot more cleaning as well. Whether that's ever going to change or whether we're doomed to clean more, I don't know, but we'll see in the future. And finally, I always like to pitch my own website, because I do. If you're interested, I have a page on my website called The 5 Horsemen of the Property Tax Apocalypse, which talks about the drivers of increasing property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McMahon. Yeah, go ahead, Director Hills.
The idea of cuts is an interesting one, and as during this term, as learning about the budget process, what staff are trying to do is make sure that the time that the board and staff are discussing is valuable. So they're not throwing anything fluffy into the mix. It's very deliberate. It's vetted through the senior leadership team. There is the financial sustainability policy, which is there to guide the regional district into financial sustainability into the future, which is to smooth all those ups and downs. So the cuts that come, it's not like we don't want a couch with reclining seats this year. It's a different kind of thing. It's very much this iterative process, and that what comes before the board is very deliberate. It's not, there is just not fluff in that. So there isn't often a lot of place to cut, because as all the various directors have said, the public is demanding these services, and that's what makes the Sunshine Coast a livable region. So so that's what I'll say about how the budget is developed. It's not developed with intending to cut. It's there to be very deliberate and not waste time going, put it in, then take it out, which if I would go back maybe 15 years ago in the regional district, that might have been a little bit more what was going on at that time. But the process changes every year. There's improvements to be made every year. And CFO and her department has received awards for their financial planning for years now, which reassures that we have a good financial ship running here. So that's all I'll say about cuts. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Hills. So Lindsay's just put something in the chat here and said thanks for mentioning the annual report. I was very concerned to read that almost no progress was made on the very outdated climate and sustainability plans and priorities last year, with the notable exceptions of work on water supply and increasing attention to landfill/waste issues. I'd appreciate hearing more about how this might shift in the coming year, in particular climate mitigation and adaptation work. You go ahead, Director Tice.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay, for that question. This is a topic that's near and dear to both, I think, Director McMahon and my heart. I am happy to say that we now have somebody that's dedicated full-time to sustainability in the organization, and that's Raf Shea, our sustainability manager, and with that on the table, we're moving forward with such things such as community carbon budgeting, and I may have the wording wrong, but we're also we have achieved some things. We've put in a study on for example, a bio cover on our landfill, which will reduce emissions if we do install it when it comes time to close our landfill, and also by diverting the organic matter out of the landfill, we're reducing our community emissions considerably. So even though it may not be reported, we are moving in the right direction. We're also installing a number of electric vehicle chargers at our SCRD facilities, and we have a more than 10% of our fleet more than 10% of our fleet purchasing is now electric vehicles, and we are certainly pushing where we can to have electric vehicles in our fleets. Of course, many of our vehicles still are heavy-duty vehicles, and it's difficult to substitute those in. But yeah, some concerted efforts are being made. We also have the Sunshine Coast Community Solar Association, who is doing an inventory of all our facilities on greenhouse gas emissions, and so there's going to be an inventory and some next steps coming out of that. So there's quite a bit going on. It's not there's no real report that puts it all together, but lots of stuff going on. Maybe Director McMahon has a few more things to add.
Yeah, great question. Very much appreciated. And I would appreciate it too if the public frequently asked that question, because you know, when we have new projects or developments going forward, we should always be looking at these things through the climate lens as much as we possibly can. One thing I'm very pleased to see, we have a vehicle maintenance facility, a garage, because we maintain our bus fleet as well as other vehicles that we have and the fire trucks. And in preparation for going electric, they are purchasing the equipment and getting the training that they will need to maintain EVs. BC Transit has committed to transitioning their fleet to electric, so we're getting ready. And I'm really happy to see that, because that's just the right direction to go. I definitely would like to see any new buildings that we build, and this has come up in relation to Cooper's Green. I'd like to see them all be net zero or net zero ready. And yeah, parks, that's another idea that people have been kicking around. We haven't gotten too far with it yet, but can we use our parks for carbon capture or for stormwater? Like, these are natural assets in addition to recreation. They're wonderful, but is there more we can get out of them? Is there more value? So love to hear ideas, and appreciate the question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Director Hills.
Yeah, I'll throw in a little pitch about the adaptation work, which, you know, the supporting of the the fire and protective services is, I think, key. We've experienced in 2021 in the Gibsons and district area, a record number of calls. So that's the other side. We're going to have to adjust to the future, and preparing the emergency responders to have the right equipment to be able to be sustainable, to have retention of volunteers is all very important. So it's not, there's a couple different sides to the story, and Director Ties mentioned the shout out to our first responders, and I'm going to shout out as well. You know, they're a dedicated bunch who, when you call 911 and they say fire, medical, or other, that's the fire department, whether that's a burst pipe or a fire alarm or someone falling down on a slippery road, which seems to be related to climate change. So we rely on these people, and we are investing in them. And so I feel good about that we're going to be secure. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We've got about 5 minutes left here. We got some more questions that have come in from folks who are attending tonight. And so Ron came back, another question here asking, did the board ever consider the question, what if staff levels were frozen and taxes were frozen? I'm not too sure I'd like to take that one. Yeah, go ahead, Director Tice.
Yes, freezing tax levels with inflation, rising costs of everything going around with COVID is, I think, a rather unrealistic expectation. I know it happened in the past, and I don't know how directors honestly justified that rationale. It's not a way of going about and creating a sustainable business. Unfortunately, we are in a growth-driven economy, which means that inflation is part of the equation, and so a certain amount of increases are always going to be necessary over the long term, and as well staffing. As our population grows, so will our staffing needs, and also as demand for our services grows, so will our staffing needs. Over the long term, there is no real possibility to do either of those things, and to be doing that on the short-term basis is also not something that I'm willing to support, because that's not something I like to look into the future and make sure that this organization is set up for a success now and into the future. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Hills.
Yeah, essentially, as I would see it, if you were to freeze everything, that's a reduction in service. And as Director Tai said, inflation at the consumer level is a different level of inflation than what happens at local governments. We just had recent contracts where brass fittings went up, supplier said 12%, it's just going up 12%. So the thing about the sustainability, and there's this concept that I really like, which is this intergenerational equity, that the people now need to pay as much as the people in the future without encumbering them in the future. So if you freeze and you shift the tax burden to the future, there's no equity between the generations. So this is partially what's trying to happen, is equity between the generations, so that the future generations aren't going to suffer because we didn't put enough in at this point. So that's one of the things that, yeah, it'd be great if I could put all my expenses in my household at zero. That would be great, but I just don't know how I'm going to do that. So I don't know how to do it, Ron. And if Ron has some great ideas on how to reduce it to zero, I'd be fire them in, please. We need all the help we can get.
You just led us nicely into what Ron wrote next, Director Hills, because he said, thanks all for this session. I've been through budgeting processes with corporations ranging all the way up to multinational resource groups, and the arguments I've heard tonight sound very familiar. So That's what he had to say. And we have another question, and just a comment, I guess, from Lindsay to round us out. So first off, it's a question from Jim, and Jim's asking, does the SCRD benchmark against other regional districts, municipalities, etc.? Tax increases in the last few years seem out of line with other areas in BC. Yeah, go ahead, Director McMahon first there, and then Director Tice.
Sure, I'll do a little bit here. Every regional district is very different. I just recently taught a course about regional districts and had to do a lot of research, and people had said that to me before, but they really, really are different, because regional districts choose which services they provide, and some provide very few services. We provide quite a lot. For instance, we have transit. And some regional districts provide even more services than we do. So trying to compare them is extremely difficult. And we come up against this occasionally, because we do try to benchmark occasionally against other regional districts. And then we end up throwing up our hands in the air to some extent. If you want to benchmark a particular service against another regional district, you could probably do that meaningfully. But if you're not comparing the same basket of groceries from one government to another, then you're not making a meaningful comparison. I don't know if Tina would like to weigh in on that either.
I would just concur, and definitely, most certainly we do amongst some of us CFOs, especially some of the ones within the Vancouver Island and coastal communities, where we have very similar types of services, but again, very diverse population, very diverse service base. So, and even some things like benchmarking with our debt to debt ratios, for instance, so different, because it really depends on what your electorate has chosen to participate. We have some regional district like Alberni Clayoquot that has the airport, where our district of Sechelt maintains our airport. So it's really quite different. So when we do try to create some ratios to measure ourselves against, there are so many caveats to it. So it's hard for them to be meaningful. So I would agree with what Director McMahon said.
Director Tice, I know you wanted to jump in there earlier.
Yeah, I think most of what I wanted to talk about has already been said, but just as an example, I think that it's called the North Coast Regional District has 5 employees, and then the Greater Vancouver Regional District has $1 billion budget and thousands of employees, and all they do is water, basically. So that there's such a gamut that, really comparisons are difficult.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Hiltz.
I can tell Ron that the regional district hires auditors for the board. It's a requirement under the Local Government Act to have an auditor to oversee this. And I have asked the auditors, how can you compare? Because there's sort of a standard suite of statistics that is collected. And whenever I ask the question, they're going, it's essentially, it becomes meaningless, because you're not making the same kind of comparison. So there might be opportunities, as Director McMahon, as you take a specific service. So whether there's a specific service, is this Jim or Ron that's asking? This is Jim?
This is Jim. Yeah.
Yeah. Whether there's a specific service Jim is interested in, would be interested. That's something, we might be able to find ways. There are key performance indicators, but it's the diversity of the services and the regional and the geography makes it very difficult. But if Jim can attend when the auditors are coming to our CAS meetings, these are sometimes for asking these kinds of questions as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We're a wee bit over time, so I'll just maybe bring in this comment from Lindsay at the end here, and if anybody would like to provide a response to it, you're more than welcome to. So Lindsay says, I also want to support increased taxation for supporting and growing the important work that the SCRD does. The time of ongoing austerity budgets is long past us, as evidenced by increasing needs and demands on the public sector to respond to important social and ecological needs. It's unrealistic to think that taxpayers can continue to underfund our public and social services and have them continue to respond to public needs. and wants as they only continue to grow in scale and urgency. So I don't know if anybody would like to respond to that in any way, shape, or form. You go ahead, Director Todd.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. These have been some really good questions. Lindsay, Ron, Jim, thank you for your engagement. And I don't know if I missed anybody, but I really appreciate the questions and the opportunity for us to be able to answer some of them. It's this kind of engagement that's needed in today's world, and you guys provided. Thank you.
Director Tice, while I have you, I may just sneak one last question in from an anonymous attendee who said they've come in a little late. They're saying apologies for showing up late. They're wondering if there's budget considerations for at-home recycling in Roberts Creek.
Oh,
Sorry for sneaking that one in.
Yeah, well, that's a big contentious issue. I, as the Roberts Creek director, have been in support of curbside pickup for recycling all along. I think it's a really good idea. My predecessors have also been quite supportive of it. Unfortunately, it looks like at this point we'd be the only ones doing it on our own. There is now a company on the coast that offers a private service. I think it's called Coast. Donna, do you remember what the name of the company is?
I believe it's Coast Bins.
Coast Bins, yeah. So yeah, it's not really a feasible idea for Area D to be the only one to do curbside pickup. And there is some arguments for the depot system as well. And compared to, say, Area A or some of the farther reaches of Area F and B, it's actually fairly easy for us Roberts Creekers to get to the depots. But yes, I would like to see curbside pickup because that's what I've resoundingly heard in the creek. But unfortunately, that's not in the cards right now. The board has decided to shelve that at this point in time. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for your answer there, Director Tice. So we're going to wrap it up now. And just so everyone knows, we've got more budget information sessions taking place over the next week. So tomorrow evening, our focus is going to be on Area A and B. You're more than welcome to join us for that session. And then next week, next Tuesday, we'll be at the regular council meeting at the town of Gibsons, providing information for town of Gibsons. And the following evening will be at District of Sechelt. So if you would like to learn more about the budget, you can do so at scrd.ca/budget. And also you can ask questions and, watch short videos, which gives you a better sense of how the budget's put together. And you can do all that at letstalk.scrd.ca/budget. So thank you, directors, for being here this evening. And thank you to Tina. So with that, we'll say good night.
Thanks very much, team.